Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Person You Want to Be. I am your host, Eric Teplitz. Today, I have the amazing honor to have with me as my guest on the podcast one of my personal all-time favorite singer-songwriters. Susan Werner is a classically trained vocalist, piano player, and guitarist with serious chops on both instruments, a versatile songwriter who tackles just about any genre and style you can think of, and an entertainer par excellence. Although you absolutely should just take my word for it and go out and see her perform live at your earliest opportunity, here are a few things others have had to say in print about her over the years. The New Yorker declared, Susan Werner, a clever songwriter and an engaging performer, brings literacy and wit back to popular song. No Depression magazine has said, when it comes to crafting a song, Ms. Werner's only peers are Jimmy Webb and Paul Simon. And Music Row magazine out of Nashville has written, this woman is great, period. Without further ado, it brings me tremendous pleasure to say, Susan Werner, welcome to The Person You Want to Be.
Thank you, Eric. Good to see you.
It's great to see you. I so appreciate you doing this interview.
My pleasure.
And I'd like to begin with a question. You can answer this. Maybe there's a musical component to it, but there doesn't have to be. But what I'm wanting to know is your earliest sense or earliest memory that you have as a child of what it was you wanted to do, what you thought you were here for, what you wanted to be when you grow up, as it were, or any such thing. Did you have any fanciful notions that you recall as a very, very young person?
So, at the age of 5, I led my first grade class at St. Mary's Elementary School uh, in church in a rendition of It's a Small World After All. And I had a guitar around my neck and I was playing it. And I knew about 5 chords. And my older brother had taught me how to play guitar. He brought a guitar home because the nuns were teaching guitar because it was the early 70s and the nuns could be groovy because of Vatican II. And anyway, so I was playing the guitar and everyone was singing. And it was like, okay, and look, all these people are looking at us. I remember this feeling of, whoa, all these people are looking at us. And then one of the guitar tuning pegs got stuck in Ann Lammer's pigtail. And she was immediately to my left. And I remember like playing and seeing that this was happening. And she lowered her head like she was beginning to feel that this was happening. I don't know how it quite happened. But I kept playing and removed the tuning peg from her hair and kept going. And this was like some sense of presence, like stage presence, right? That you can be doing the thing and also aware that you're doing the thing and alter the experience from within the experience. And all of that was super powerful.
Hmm.
And here I am, how many years later? 50 years later, right? Been playing guitar and singing in front of groups of people, and having some awareness about being in the room with other people. That's the nature of being a singer-songwriter.
I love that intuitive sense of the show must go on.
The show is going on right
Yeah,
now,
right.
right?
But you
And
didn't
there's
panic. You didn't panic.
I don't know why I didn't panic, but I didn't. I guess it's like, well, everyone's singing, so let's see if we can keep this going. And she didn't freak out, which was super help, right?
Yeah.
That, and I still know her. Uh, But she didn't freak out, which made it easy for whatever happened, on my side of the equation. But there was something about the, what is it, sang-froid of being on stage. Like you can hang on to yourself and your
Hmm.
presence in this moment amidst variables, and there you go. That's something started then that is still going on.
Yeah. Do you remember what it felt like? Did it feel exhilarating? Do you remember any emotions tied to it?
I think that things got really intense when the guitar peg was stuck
Hmm.
in her hair. There was a great intensity of something going possibly wrong and then getting out of it. It's almost like putting your head in the alligator's mouth, right? Or the
Mm.
lion's mouth. Like there was something about that moment that was even more interesting than just a performance, was that something was at stake. I think that has played a role ever since, that there's
Mm.
something a little bit thrilling I want to keep in the performance. And that's when a performance gets really interesting to me. I mean, you've been kind enough to come to a couple of my shows, and the show gets really great when something happens that I didn't know was going to happen and nobody else in the room knew was going to happen. Somebody trips, somebody, just something random occurs. Someone can't stop coughing. Doesn't matter. Whatever it is, now we have a show.
Mm.
It's the show, and then it's the real show that is happening because this is right now. And I've never thought of these things even before this conversation right now, but I do think there's something about the moment where something could go
Yeah, because
wrong.
otherwise you're just a robot, right? You're just
There's something about having done it before, right? Yeah, that these are songs, I do sometimes change them. I'll change them on the fly.
Mhm.
I'll change the order of them on the fly. But there's nothing quite like this night, this room, this moment, this audience, these people, us. That really just elevates the experience to a whole nother level.
Yeah. That's why I do sincerely urge people to go and see you live because as great as your songs are, and you can listen to recordings of them or watch, videos of them or what have you, there's no substitute for the live experience. And the best musicians and performers and players that I know are the ones you want to see live, the ones that, you know, are creating something in the moment, just like you were describing.
I think it's
Um,
the difference between like, pardon me. I think it's
mhm.
the difference between like stage acting and film acting or something,
Mm.
right? That recording is more like film acting, and playing live is more like theater acting, where you have to up and out, right? Whereas film is up close, and you can almost whisper and sell it, right? Um, and recording, you can almost whisper, and it even turns out better, right? Different, yeah, different sports, really.
Yeah. Um, so one thing that strikes me is just you talk about being 5 years old and playing the guitar. And was that the very first musical instrument that you got your hands on that you started playing? Because the guitar is not, physically speaking, the easiest instrument for a 5-year-old to start on.
But if you're a kid, you don't know, right?
Yeah,
You
that's
just
true.
know that this is it. There is no question of easy or not easy. It's just
Mm.
what came in the door, and it's like, okay, these are the patterns. There's the pattern,
So it
right?
was
It's
it
like
was your first instrument.
maybe my grandmother had a player piano in the basement. That was pretty interesting. Like running the rolls through and
Mm.
seeing like the stenography of the, punch cards, or I can't remember this, just the scroll of the music going by, the perforated paper creating this result, right? The pedaling of it and
Mm.
watching it go by, and then starting to manipulate it, right? Like, oh, I see. If I do kink, if I reach in and kink at this point, or I alter the paper, it'll get a different result. It's just patterns. To me, it was patterns, and
Mm.
patterns create these results. Wow. I liked that a lot.
And you didn't stop with guitar. So what other instruments were part of your childhood?
So I played saxophone pretty well in high school, and I could improvise on it. I can improvise on anything, and that's wonderful and handy and social. That's what's great about being able to improvise, is it's immediately social. Um, Give me 5 minutes, I can figure things out, right?
Mm.
But to really credibly do it, it's guitar and piano and singing.
And what was your childhood environment like, if you could speak to that? And how much was or wasn't music a part of it? Were your parents musical? Was there music around the house? What was your exposure to music and relationship to it like as a kid?
My mother sings like a bird. She really, really sings well. And the church runs alongside much of this musical development. So her father discovered uh, at um, at the Petersburg Church, Petersburg, Iowa, um, that if his daughters sang in the choir, he didn't have to pay what they called pew tax. You used to have to pay to have a pew for your family, but if your daughters sang in the choir, you didn't have to pay that. So she was in the choir from early, and she loved it. And then when my folks raised us, 6 kids, so she was always singing, and I think that it brought her great joy to see her kids enjoying music. Um, and we would actually, spontaneously harmonize. I mean, it was a little bit
Wow.
Sound of Music. It really was. We would be in the car, what they used to call a Catholic cruiser, like a Pontiac, an Olds 88, um, or a Pontiac Bonneville. Like we're talking about the big, like sofas, right? There was a sofa in the front seat, and bench seats, right? Sofa in the front, sofa in the back, and the rear wheel drive hump in the middle, right? So you
Hmm.
got two parents with 2 kids between them, and then 4 kids in the back.
Wow.
And Dad did not sing, but he would whistle. But the rest of us, it really was like we were driving to Grandma's house for Christmas, and we're singing Christmas carols in 4-part harmony, and it's happening. And when I was a kid, I thought everybody was like that.
Hmm.
It wasn't until I was like 7 or 8 that I realized not everybody's like that. Um, it's a
And
little
your
bit
affinity
magical,
for your
right?
affinity for big cars started th-
Yeah, and big vehicles. I grew up on a working farm, and operating the tractor was an honor one earned, right? That was something you had to be adult enough to do. Around 12 or 13 years old, you would get to drive the tractor. And then when we were baling hay, like you would have the tractor, and then the baler, and then the wagon in the back, right? And here's your father back there, and you're 13, and you're driving a tractor. And if you corner too tight, I mean, you kill your own dad,
Yep.
right? So seriously, there's a certain, like, now you're an adult
Yeah, rite
because
of
now
passage.
it's a rite of passage. If you're entrusted with the tractor, now you're an adult in a certain way. But I do love, large motor vehicles. I like them. I like what they do. I like what they're capable of. That is probably a legacy of farming. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and where were you in the birth order?
Number 5 out of 6.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, you have a song on your album, Time Between Trains, called Like Bonsai. And in that song, it's funny. As a listener, we don't always know when someone is writing autobiographically, but you do get a sense sometimes that a song, it rings true in that way. You think this must be the songwriter telling you about herself. And I bring this song up because in the song you mention your mother, or the narrator's mother, wanting to go to high school, but not having the opportunity, being a woman in the time that she grew up. First of all, true. And is this autobiographical? This.
Yeah, it's true enough, right? Or
Mm.
autobiographical.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Well, there's more
Creative
autobiography.
nonfiction.
Yeah, I think the fact that there's gravel roads and access to education, all of that is part of um, my mother's generation and farming. Yeah, and this is, to me, was a moment in the United States in the 50s and 60s where sending your kids to college was really, this was important, especially for, my folks both got a GED. They didn't go to
Mhm.
college. They didn't finish high school other than the GED, because when 8th grade, it's time to start working,
Right.
right? Um, and so in my folks' office, they have the pennant from each college that their 6 kids graduated from. And that will always be a badge of honor to them. And it is to their credit that they saw that through.
Yeah. And times were obviously different, but still there's the issue of affording to send 6 kids to college. Today, it's literally unthinkable. But I wonder, what was that like for them in that at that time?
Uh, this is what they had determined they wanted to do, and they also knew that there was a different price, a
Oh, of course,
a different
absolutely. Yeah,
pricing kind of deal. I mean,
yeah.
a state university, right? Different deal entirely at that time. So we went, but there were some student loans involved, but there was a lot of, financial support, Pell Grants. At that moment, I just think again that the United States was robust in its giving in those times, in a way that it's much tighter now.
Yeah, and I understand that you got a scholarship as well.
That helps.
Um, yeah, of course. And you initially, if I can find it in my notes, you started at Luther College
I did.
initially.
I did. Everybody went to University of Iowa. All my friends went there, my brother and my sister gone there. And it's like, that's kind of the obvious choice. So I wanted to do something different. And Luther has a great music school. So I went up there and right away I was like, oh, I don't want to do choral music. I think I want to do jazz or something else. So then I transferred down to Iowa and I had a great experience at Iowa.
So are already then you had your sights set on music going into college. And
Well, yeah, and it was a way to get a scholarship, right? I mean, I wasn't so, extraordinary at anything else, but I could do that, and that helped bring the money down. Yep.
interesting. Um, and then getting back to what I was asking earlier, in regard to like what music you grew up around. You mentioned the church, so I'm sure that was part of it. What other, memorable musical influences were there that you feel looking back were really impactful?
Yeah, we had a great high school theater teacher, and like a lot of theater people, your theater teacher was huge. Um, they see some talent in you, and they challenge you a little bit and make you, meet the moment. I was Bloody Mary in South Pacific. I mean, this tells you how, non it tells you how homogenous the racial makeup was of my high school. That I am playing the South Pacific Islander. Okay, yeah, uh, but I loved all of that. I loved being in the theater and again an audience and a sense of the moment. But I also started to pay attention to the structure of a show. Like, how was this show assembled? What are the payoff moments? Like, what's happening here in the first act, second act? And watching it from the side and kind of, again, seeing like a structure, right? There's an architecture to this, which I didn't know would come in handy later, but certainly musical theater is a whole part of the deal, too. Yeah.
What about writing in general? Like English, was that a strong subject for you? Did you enjoy writing? Did it manifest in poetry or any other,
Yeah,
media?
I was writing songs already, and I'll tell you,
Hmm.
in college, I was writing like topical songs, and it was going over really well. I was like, wow, people really like this. Like, I play my guitar and sing a song, and hey, I'm putting ideas in order, and people like it. Well, great. Well, of course, that wasn't going to pay any bills, really. I mean, I had a scholarship. Okay, keep singing in French, right? Keep doing, keep doing that. And when I went to graduate school too, I was like, oh well, I'll just keep doing this because this is, this will bring me some benefit in terms of keeping tuition down.
So it
So
was it was like more of a practical. This sounds hilarious, by the way, in 2023, right?
yeah,
It's late 2023 as we're having this conversation. And the idea of majoring in music because it's quote unquote practical and will help the cost go down is, I mean, it's downright hilarious by today's standards, right?
right. But this can be transferred to almost any area of study. It's like, oh, if you're good at that, you do that because that may help pay the bills, whatever it is.
Sure.
And then you get attached to that as the thing that you should be doing, right? Or the thing that you should be. And then when I'm 24 and I'm done with graduate school and I'm taking auditions, and there are women who have voices the size of trucks, and I'm like, this is not going to happen. I mean, I just sank into this awful depression. Like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And I picked up my guitar and started writing songs. And all of all of my pals in Philadelphia were like, "Where have you been? This is great." And I'm like, "Okay, okay. Okay, okay. Yeah, but this is not the serious music." They're like, "Who cares? This is great. Come on." And then I saw, because I know you have some relationship with Philly, I saw Nanci Griffith at the Chestnut Cabaret in like 1991 or something. And that was like bing,
Mm.
bing, the bells, the lights. That's it. Like, that's it. Here's a woman from rural America who's writing songs that communicate from within her own experience out to many, right? That was a huge moment where I saw the way that was going to be it. And it pretty much still is it.
Wow. So let's back up a little bit. So you finished your undergrad at University of Iowa. How did you land on Temple in Philly, my hometown, for grad school? What was involved in that decision?
So I went out, I auditioned down at Baylor in Texas because my voice teacher had moved from Iowa City down to Waco. And I went down there and did an audition, and he's like, "Hey, we got a full ride for you, and come on down." I was like, "I don't know about Waco." And then someone else I knew at the university said, "Hey, can you get to Philly?" And I'm like, "Sure." Uh, I happen to have an extra ticket for just this credit that goes from, Chicago to Philly. And she says, "I want you to audition for somebody."
Who said
And
this
I
now?
went, Tamara Brooks was the director of choral studies at University of Iowa at that time. She used to direct the Mendelssohn Club in Philly. So she knew Harold Parker and Miriam and Mildred Parker, who were out in Philly. And I went out to Philly and I met Harold Parker. I knew that was it because
Hmm.
he was so brilliant, and he was so much about the words. Not about the noise, but about the words and communicating the sense of what it is you're saying to a room full of people. And that was like a straight shot right out of my heart. Like, this is
Hmm.
it. And so I went to Philly and got a free ride at graduate school. I had to be a graduate assistant, of course, teach classes, but again, it paid the bills to move me from one part of the country to another, and
How
that's how I got to
much,
Philly.
yeah, having grown up in a small town in Iowa on a farm, how much experience did you have in big cities? Did you visit them much growing up? Did you feel like what was that transition like moving from Iowa to Philadelphia?
It was a big adjustment. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a big adjustment. But I was also ready for it. I'm like,
Mm.
okay, let's go. What's the world about? Let's go. And I love Philly. I'm always grateful to Philly. I feel like it toughened me up. Like,
Mm.
you know, who you looking at? That can be very handy. That sort of very practical, like eyes around you, like, what do you want? What is
It's
your
so
end?
true.
What is your end game here? Right? If you're interacting with me, why? And that skepticism, like walking into it like, what do you
Was that
want?
disarming?
I don't know if it was disarming. I'm not sure that's the word. It was just sort of a practical. I've
Mm.
experienced the practical benefit of that
Mm.
all the rest of my life. Yeah, it was good. Toughened me up.
Right. So you studied opera, right, at Temple?
Yeah.
And you mentioned that you, after school, had done some auditioning and sort of realized that you were in over your head in terms of the competition of, I mean, I can only imagine, right? Um, and it sounds like it was really at the encouragement, the social encouragement you got when you picked up the guitar and played your own songs that directed you like, oh, this could be a thing. It really hadn't occurred to you prior to that. Like you didn't have ambitions to do that prior other than just for your own entertainment or to maybe
Yeah,
entertain.
I just didn't take it seriously, right?
Mm,
I just didn't take it seriously. And I'm not quite sure why, but I did not understand there was going to be a path here. It also helped to see a role model,
yeah.
right? That made a difference.
Was it not taken seriously by, your teachers in school and therefore do you think that that might have, you know,
Yeah,
influenced your
there's some of
opinion?
that. I mean, when you're in the conservatory setting, I
Yeah,
mean,
it's
these
like
people are
there's real music, right? And everything else.
it's just this tunnel vision,
Mm.
right? Like you need to measure up to this and that and this and that, and it's just you're in a silo and you don't even know. And then you get out, you're like, whoa, hey, what? Yeah, hey, there's a whole world out here. But when you're in it, I think this is true for anybody who's really focused on a thing. You get down into this zone. Anyway, but I'll tell you that I did my I played a song of mine for my voice teacher when I was getting ready for my graduate recital. I played a song that I wrote. And
Did you
he
accompany yourself?
yeah, I sat at the piano and just sang it. And he sat down and she pulled up a chair and sat down. He looked at me, he said, "You could be in the wrong line of work." You know what I mean? Like all the opera stuff was like
Okay, because
divided
I
over
was going to say there's
wrong.
a lot of different ways you might take that. Um,
Yeah.
but
No,
that
that's what
sounds
he
like what he,
meant.
yeah, that's what he meant. Yeah.
Was like, yeah, this is good what you do here, but that's something.
So maybe that
And
was the first time it was pointed out to you. Yeah.
that was the first time. Yeah. And then I'll tell you, like, I'd have conversations with him where, I mean, this sounds a little crazy, but I'd be singing a Schubert lead, right? And I'd be like, I really like what Schubert did here, but I wonder if he had done this, if there would have been a different outcome.
Hmm.
And I remember him kind of looking at me like,
You're questioning. Yeah.
like, but first, like, yeah, first, like, you're gonna write a better song than Schubert, but also like paying attention to a pattern. Like, what's the pattern here? What would happen if you moved this item, moved this around? And those are sort of the behaviors of composers, right?
I just had a flashback to the film Amadeus, where there's a scene where Salieri prepares a piece that he wrote to welcome Mozart in, and
Yeah, I know.
Mozart
Yeah, I
hears
know
it
that
once and
scene.
says, "Oh, that was very. Did you think about doing this?" And he basically just
It's a well
rewrites it
done
on the
scene,
spot.
isn't
Yeah,
it? Yeah, it's
yeah,
terrific. Yeah.
um, yeah. Very, very interesting. So, what were you? And I know also that when you were at Temple,
I
you,
just want to point
yeah,
out that me and Mozart, yeah,
yeah, exactly.
we're like
Same league, same league.
yeah, just okay.
Um,
For the avoidance of doubt. I just yeah.
um, Mozart wishes he could have written a song like "Recumbent Bike," for instance.
I'm sure that's exactly what he was. I'm sure he left that undone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't.
Well,
It's
he only lived to 35, so you can't
right.
completely fault him. Um,
Apples and alligators. Right.
now, when you were at Temple, you were also doing jazz piano gigs on the side, right? You played restaurants and piano bars and things like that. And you
Yep.
played also, like you did these solo, but did you not also play in trios and such as well?
Yeah.
Were these with fellow students or?
No, at some point I just became part of the jazz scene in Philly. And it was just great. That was the most fun. That's when the time went by the fastest. It still is when I have somebody to interact with musically. If I have a side player, that's the most fun. Um, you're just in the moment. And again, because if you make a change and they make a change, now you're having a conversation and you can't think about anything else. It's like playing, I don't know, I hate to do this, but like basketball, you don't know what the other person's going to do, but they make a move. Now you make a move. And now you are just absolutely focused on the moment. There's no place else to be.
Hmm.
That's part of the joy of being a musician. Yeah.
Yeah, well, what?
Writers don't get some of those satisfactions. Writers have surprises, right? Composers have surprises. But it's different when you're playing music with somebody because it's like you're both driving motorcycles down the road and you're throwing a, tennis ball back and forth. Like you're already right. You're already driving a motorcycle. Stakes are high, and then you throw, you're trying to do something while in motion. You can't think about anything else.
Yeah, it makes you feel alive, right?
Super alive.
Yeah. And what's really, I mean, it is unusual, Susan, like, there are people who, let's say, learn to read music, they study classical, whatever their instrument is, and, or voice. And to get good at that in and of itself is an incredible amount of hard work, right? Like be certainly, competitive if you're thinking about pursuing it seriously as a career. Um, but to also be playing jazz and improvising and to also be playing your own songs you're writing on the guitar in addition to being like proficient at piano, like This is unusual. Let me just, in case you were wondering, right? Did your music teachers at school and at Temple, were they aware of these, different sides of your musical abilities? And did they have any, other than the one, teacher that you mentioned, did they have anything to say about it? Did anyone try to dissuade you this is going to, like, interfere or get in the way? Or what kind of feedback did you get about that? Or, yeah.
The general feeling was, I mean, this is a guess, but
Hmm.
I did get this sense that they felt like it's going to be interesting to see how this turns out, right? Like someone walks in with this basket of, right, assorted talents, and how is this going to, how is she going to integrate her talents and abilities, and when? And it might be something to consider when talking with young people who are just getting out into whatever they're doing. Is, yeah, I like to say something like, give your, when I talk with young people starting out, I'll say something like, give yourself a long runway, right? Give yourself a long period of time to find out how you're going to assemble what it is that you do, that is unique to you and that other people find uh, wonderful, and where those things meet.
Mm.
But give yourself time to integrate, because we come out in these little cattle chutes, right? But the world is all of it's there are no cattle chutes. It's the Great Plains, and you got to find a way, right, to put together, if you want to do this for a living, find a way to put your talent together with a business, with income. And that isn't apparent the minute you're out the gate. It really isn't.
Well, and with music, I mean, that's a notoriously difficult thing to pull off in any
In art in
capacity.
general, in art in general,
Yeah, for sure.
right?
So were you dead set, um, let's say, even when you weren't quite sure of your specific musical path, maybe just out of Temple, realizing maybe opera is not going to be it, and you're in that uncertain, depressed period you mentioned.
Really depressed, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
What did that look like? Did you really think, like, did you have all your sort of eggs in that proverbial basket? Did you have all of your, like, your heart invested in that?
Yeah. I wouldn't say, I mean, I wouldn't say that I had suicidal ideation, but I
Mhm.
would say that I was really, really lost. And I had these other talents, but I didn't take them seriously. You know, the great
Mm.
dream was lost. The great ship had gone down, right? And I didn't know what these other things were were going to mean at all. Um, and it was just a failure. Yeah, it's not the right word, but a blind spot, that I didn't see what currency these
Mm.
other talents had with people. I think sometimes, pardon me, I think sometimes those periods of depression, it's a form of myopia,
Yeah.
because we just can't see it yet, what the way out is, or what the next thing will be. We just can't see it yet. It's a failure of vision. It's not a failure of you living your life.
Mm.
It's simply an inability to see yet what the next thing will look like, and to allow for the weather to change, it'll look different once the weather changes, but to hang
Especially in
in there for
Philly.
that. Yes,
So
absolutely.
what do you attribute to getting out of that depressive space you were in, and allowing the light to shine through, and other possibilities to reveal themselves to you? What do you attribute that to, and how long do you think that took?
I'll tell you, there was something that accelerated it. When I was 26, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, which is pretty young for a thing like that. And uh, I remember, I remember thinking, if I'm going to do something, I better do it
Hmm.
now, because I don't really know how long I'm going to have to do whatever it is I'm going to do. And that hustles you long. All of a sudden, there's a clock. And when there's a clock, you're willing to do some of the things that you might
Hmm.
have been unwilling to do before. For instance, to build an audience in Philly as a songwriter. Look, as a songwriter, singer-songwriter anywhere, or a performer anywhere, you have to build an audience. These were the means to building an audience. Open mics, get out, get seen, get people's addresses. I had like a sign up clipboard, right?
Mhm.
And I got people's addresses and I sent out little postcards. I would make them at, Kinko's Copies, right? I would go down and I would put on little postcard stamps. I did this. And this was after I had cancer. I was like, okay, if this is what it takes to do this thing, to do something that I want to do well. Okay, this is the business. I got to build it. Okay. It made me willing to do some of the hard work, the grunt work
Mm.
to build an audience. And yeah, that urgency, that made a difference. It did. And of course, good fortune, I'm here and I'm fine. But no one's going to tell you that when you're diagnosed with cancer, especially an aggressive kind, and you're young and it's weird, and they're giving you like clinical trials and stuff.
Wow. How
Yeah.
long before recovered even just physically? I know generally it's what, 5 years of being in remission before you're kind of given a clean bill of health. But how much time were you, physically um, dealing with that for, where it was affecting you every day?
Yeah, you get, I mean, anybody who's gone through radiation, chemo will just tell you it's cumulative, right? You just get
Mm.
tireder and tireder as it goes on. Um,
That's
so,
very young. Wow.
yeah, so like a year of great unpleasantness. Um, but through that, it was like, how am I gonna, you have to have something else that you're doing. You can't just be doing that.
Yeah.
And it put a fire under my ass. And
Yeah, and I know that you met Faye Khan in a cancer support group, and
yes,
we will get to that. I'm going to put a pin in that. But
yeah.
uh, so wow, that's really interesting. And once you were pursuing that and playing local clubs in Philly, any ones you want to name by
Oh yeah.
name?
Yeah, I mean the Mermaid Inn, the Blushing Zebra, the Goat Hollow Tavern, uh, all of those, Godfrey Daniels, all that stuff, and yeah, and playing those open mics, and then you get to a night where you're the headliner, and then you're doing it, and then people from the Philadelphia Folk Festival said, "Why don't you come play the Philadelphia Folk Festival?" And I'm like, "Okay, yeah, that's great,
Wow.
right?" And then someone didn't show up. There was a stroke of good luck.
What year,
Someone
by the
didn't,
way, was this invitation to the
I think
Philadelphia Folk Festival?
91, maybe
Okay.
91, 92. Anyway, someone didn't show up for the Friday night headliner. And I think it was Andy Braunfeld said, "Hey, you want to play on the main stage tonight?" I'm like, "Yeah." And I'd had a vision of it. This is so weird. I am not the most mystical person, but
Mm.
I'd had an image of the crowd from the stage of the Philadelphia Folk Festival from about 6 months before it happened. And the vision was very much from the main stage, though I had not been booked to play the main stage. And when I got out there, I looked down, I'm like, oh yeah, this is it. Yeah, I saw this just like this. Wild, right?
What, yeah, when you say vision, like how did that come to you? I mean, was it a dream? Was it like you're in the middle of the day and you just have this vision? What was that? How did that?
I don't know that it was a dream. But
Yeah.
it might have been. I was seeing this Buddhist therapist at the time who was super great,
Hmm.
Gabriel Rocco. He was terrific, and having cancer is a great time to become a Buddhist. And honestly, it is. I mean, of all the times, but and yeah, very handy to have someone talking to you about presence and awareness. Yes, because every moment needs to be very um, the moments may be fewer than you thought, right? Anyway, I think it was probably in a meditation or something like that. But yeah, I saw this vision, and then again, I was booked for one of the side stages, and then Andy that day says, "Hey, somebody didn't make it. You want to get up on the main stage?" I'm like, "Yeah,
Wow, but
yeah."
you actually like had this, oh, this was that. You had like wow, that's
This was
incredible.
this was that. It looked exactly like this in my head, and here it is. Yeah,
Amazing.
it
So
was
what,
amazing.
yeah. Had you been to the Philadelphia Folk Festival prior to that?
I had, but I hadn't been on the main stage.
Yeah.
But I'd been there before and running around, the campfires and the whole bit. Big
Yeah.
fun. Yeah, yeah.
How did playing the open mics and playing your own songs for audiences on guitar compare to the feeling of aliveness you mentioned, doing those piano trio and piano bar type gigs?
Well, the your own material has a different
Hmm.
um has your own material has a different risk level, maybe, and immediacy. Um because when you're playing jazz or you're singing classical music, that material predates you. And there are a lot of other artists who have their fingerprints on that stuff. But when you write your own material, you're the originator. You are the watermark, right? You're it. And
So
I
does the
had it.
connection to the audience then, is it a lot more gratifying then when you know that something you created lands?
Yeah, yes, because uh, you can. It's almost you can see it. It's like telling a joke.
Hmm.
When you wrote it, you know where this line is coming up. And if you play it, a couple times, you're like, oh, that's where that lands. If it's a joke, you would know the joke is going to land, and you're just following. You're seeing it almost from above. You're like, oh, this is going to do that, and then you see the joke land, and people laugh. You're like, oh yeah, you can feel the room, especially when you get a little bit of talent in terms of delivery, and you become, a theatrical performer, and you start to just slow it down a little bit as you get closer to the joke because the anticipation is half the fun. Uh, and even when you write a ballad and there's a moment of, something in the song where the the music and the lyrics combine to bring something forward. There's a song I have called Manhattan, Kansas,
Hmm.
and it talks about it's from the point of view of a woman who has an abortion, and she goes on to have two other children. She has two daughters, and she talks about it in the third verse. And it talks about her as a young woman having this abortion, and she was at school at K State uh, and Kansas State University in Manhattan. And she talks about how she watches her daughters grow and she keeps sunflowers on the table. I didn't even realize how good that line was
Hmm.
until I played it out because it's like sunflowers. I didn't even get that myself until somebody came up to me after a show. They're like, that is really powerful. I'm like, oh yeah, because it's Kansas, right? And they're like, no, it's the son she did not have.
Yeah.
Boom.
Subconscious, it's interesting. It's kind of like someone pointing out to Paul McCartney that yesterday was about his mother dying when he was 14. And that was not a conscious choice in his part when he's writing why she had to go. I don't know. She wouldn't say, but it certainly, and that's the
Wow.
beauty though of songs, right? Is that they can mean different things to different people. And even the writer can be oblivious to, like, once it's out the gate, it doesn't completely belong to you anymore. And other people can project things onto it and derive meanings from it that you never even imagined, but that are really powerful.
Yeah, and people are having perfectly valid, complete experiences around you, even though you're the writer, right? We think like, oh, I am going to put human experience, affix it, right? I'm going to, shape
Capture it.
it, and yeah, I'm going to capture it in this way that everyone will see it. It's like you're just holding up a mirror,
Mm.
and everybody's seeing their own face in it. And if you made a good mirror, everyone sees their own face in it, right? They really see that's what makes a song powerful is the ability to help people look at their own lives. If you're up there and they're thinking about you, mhm, you might, yeah, you didn't quite get it done, I don't think.
Mm. But also, I love the self-discovery aspect of it, which can happen during the writing of it, which makes it fun because you don't know what's going to come out. But also, even like you said, after the fact, when people respond to it and point things out to you that you didn't even, So there's lots of rewards to that.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and that's a great song, Manhattan, Kansas.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
among many, you've written many really, like, really, really powerful songs. And you're right. Like, I'm thinking about being in the audience and seeing your shows, and of course, I'm being I am having myself reflected back to me. I did not have an abortion, obviously, but I mean, I am having experiences that resonate with me and my life when you play your songs, and yeah, it's magic. There's no other word for it.
Well,
Um,
hopefully I'm throwing a good dinner party up there. Hopefully there's there's the magician, but there's the trick, right? I mean, someone's got to do it, right? So as an entertainer, I'm a host of an evening, but the song should be like, you know, yeah, you, and then play another one, don't talk, you, right? And then we come back here. Okay, yep, we're in LA tonight. We're at McCabe's. How we doing? Yep. Okay, this person just fell out of their chair. You okay? Right? There's the moment of the us now, and then there's the mirrors. Yeah.
yeah, and one of the shows I saw you do at McCabe's some years ago, I don't know if you had intended to do this or not, but you closed the show by you stepped off stage and just walked amongst the crowd and sang a cappella without a microphone or anything. You sang La Via en Rose, like just, and you created this moment of magic that no one could have, anticipated. Like people don't do this. Like
That's
I
where the
don't do.
opera comes in handy, right?
Yeah, you
It's a
can pull
good
that out.
it's a good trick at parties. I can also throw my lazy eye out. But um, uh, yeah. Who said it? Mabel Mercer, I think, the cabaret singer, said the nature of cabaret is to sing a song so that two people who came fall even more deeply in love with each other.
Oh wow.
That's your mission as a cabaret singer.
No pressure.
And well, but when I sing that song, right,
Mm,
or other songs of kind feeling,
mm.
um, I hopefully bring people together, or help them connect with themselves, and that's the effect you want to leave with people. Is that they went somewhere closer to each other, closer to themselves, closer to the people next to them, and that's a pleasure to do that. I feel like it's my profession, like other people are, skilled mechanics or surgeons or, people with, professional expertise. This is what I can do. And hopefully this, is of real use and benefit, you know?
Well, speaking for myself and everyone I know that is familiar with you or has seen you perform or knows your music, yeah, yes, we can affirm that.
Great.
I have some questions just in terms of out of my own curiosity to know specific turning points in your journey. So you're playing these clubs in Philly. Well, first of all, this appearance on the main stage at the Philadelphia Folk Festival, what did that do for your life? What was your life? Was that a before and after kind of moment?
Yeah, because then other festivals start to invite you, right? Because the people who run the festival talk to other people who run festivals. And then you start playing, then you're playing the Ottawa Folk Festival. Then you're playing Falcon Ridge. Then you're playing Newport. Then you're playing Rocky Mountain Folks Fest out in Colorado. Those people all talk to each other. So, you just get to step up and then, oh, there's another step up. And some of it just happens because you showed up and did a good job of things. That's the one variable you can control, right?
Hmm.
In any field of endeavor is just always be excellent and let things, let other people represent you better than you even represent yourself.
How did you how did you manage to own your part, take, responsibility for your part in showing up and being excellent, but being completely helpless to everything else and the fates? And I'm sure you saw people as you were coming up being excellent, but not getting noticed or not getting, you know, particular traction. Oh, I don't know how do you think you navigated that? Did you have a
You know,
particular
some
mentality toward it?
two things. One is this willingness to do some of the grunt work, right? Like maintaining that mailing list and this little engine of publicity from within my own, right? From within my own means and effort. That to take, someone said to me once, you won't find a music manager until you have something to manage, right? You have to have a business enough first to justify somebody else getting involved. And then I did have a great manager, Larry Goldfarb, who ran the Tin Angel for all those years. And you know, he was good at putting the business together, knew how to get record deals. He ran a venue. He knew what venues wanted from artists, and
Mm.
the willingness to do the business helped all the way along. And to me, it was worth doing the business because I wanted the opportunity to make music and to perform and to write songs, right? I wanted to make the art. So the business was a means to get to the art.
To allow
And
you to
I'm
do
not
it. Yeah.
sure, yeah, and I'm not sure. I think maybe growing up on a farm had something to do with that. Because, I mean, people are like, oh, you know, Susan, you work really hard. No, my folks worked hard.
Mm.
There's nobody more hardworking than a dairy farmer. That's hard work. Okay. Okay. So I was like, okay, I have to go to Kinko's tonight and make copies for
Right.
5 hours. And then I have to go to the post office. And then I have to show up early. And then I have to stay late and break down. And I have to bring in my own PA and my, right? This is nothing. This is absolutely nothing compared to what I saw. And I think that does factor into why some people are willing to do these things and why some people aren't. Where are you at on the scale of hard work? Right.
Mm.
And if what you're doing looks a little easier, you know, yeah, you'll make your own good luck. Right. If you know how hard it can be for, you know, somebody else.
Yeah. So you said two things. That was the first thing. What was the second thing?
Yeah, I think Larry was really helpful, that he knew the business and that
How did
helped.
how did he become your manager?
Um, I, I think, I think he was. It got word got out. First of all, Gene Shea was a DJ at
Oh yeah.
WHYY, and he had a folk show every Sunday night. And Gene told Larry to, you know, check me out. And so I guess Larry came to some show I was doing in Philly. And then I'd heard that from Gene. Gene said that Larry was opening this venue for songwriters called the Tin Angel, and he was taking submissions. And so then I put together like a cassette and like a one sheet cover sheet. You know, this was the 80s or
Hmm.
90s. These are the things you did. You got a word processor and you did it, or you went to Kinko's, right? And I got a, you know, I got a phone call, and he's like, "Hey, I just really like your stuff." I said, "Oh, great, you want to meet?" Yeah. So I met with him and his business partner Rick Cohen, and you know, we began to strategize about how to get a record deal. Like that was going to be the brass ring. You're going to aim at that, right? Because that would be worth his time. And again, you have to have something worth managing for a manager to get involved with you. And I
Had
was
he
willing to hear that.
successfully landed record deals for other clients?
Yes,
Who
right.
was on his roster at that time?
Jeffrey Gaines,
Oh yeah,
and
Hero and Me.
yeah, that's him. Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly right. And so he had a deal on Chrysalis, and he had another act. Ben Arnold, I think, got a deal with. I'm trying to think what his deal. It wasn't Interscope. I'm trying to think, but anyway, he knew how to do that, right, and how to run the you run the gamut. Really, it's an obstacle course. You know, you gotta court the A&R people. You gotta go play shows where they are and meet them halfway, all of that. And he knew how to do that. And that
Hmm.
was really helpful. And then also when a, you know, major label record company spends $250,000 promoting you, right? That helps everything. And that's publicity that happens because of all the publicity you did yourself, right? Um, because that's how you know, that's how you started your career. And then you
So how
see
how
publicity
long how long
happen.
was it, would you say, from the time you started playing out with your guitar to landing the record deal? How much time are we talking about?
6 years, 7 years, maybe
Wow,
six.
okay. That's not insignificant. And how did you get by during that time, like in terms of paying the bills?
Yeah, I played a lot of weddings. I played a lot of bar mitzvahs.
Okay.
I had a slogan that I decided in 1992. I'm like, weddings free in 93. Like I will no longer have to sing weddings
Mm,
anymore. Like all my income will come from my own shows.
right.
But
But
you know, but
interesting.
to do that, I was doing like society ball gigs in New York and stuff. Like, you know, this was the skill set. This was the, you know, I had a skill set that would pay the bills. That was my day job, really. But I also typed up like asbestos abatement policies in an insurance company in Philly and Bala Cynwyd for like 4 years.
Oh, no
Uh,
kidding. Wow.
yeah, yeah. You got to
Okay.
pay the bills. Yeah.
Absolutely. No, it's helpful to hear that. And then and so were you still doing jazz piano gigs as well as a to like to make money, but your focus was on the singer-songwriter thing?
Because again, this was the route, right? Once the
Yeah.
route
So
appears, and
it's
this
so
is, yeah.
hilarious that your jazz like piano gigs were what made up one of your day jobs, right? Like that
Hmm.
was,
That's
and
right.
also I really appreciate the distinction you made about like you were still making a living I think, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, because you mentioned this now, this gig in Bala Cynwyd, this day job, but you were making a living playing, weddings and bar mitzvahs before you were making a living playing your own music.
Oh yeah.
But it's was that fair to say you were making a living doing that, or was that one like just part of the equation?
There was a point where I didn't have to do the office job anymore,
Yeah.
but I was doing my own shows, but also weddings and bar mitzvahs and the society ball band and putting it together,
Yeah.
freelancing, really.
Because there's so many ways to make, potentially at least, make a living as a musician, and one such way is literally playing events. And like for some people that's enough. They're happy because, hey, I'm playing music for my dinner, right? Like
Right.
and for some people that's like that in and of itself. And it's not an easy thing to even reach that level, but it is a very different thing to play music on your own terms, your own music, the music you want to play, your music, for audiences that want to hear it, and to be able to pay the bills doing that is a completely different thing. And I think if you aspire to do that, it's painful to have to do the other thing, at least for too long.
Well,
I mean, it could be.
I don't know that I don't know that that part of it surprised me so much. Again, I think it had to do with what's hard work.
Yeah.
And this
And
all
also
was,
what you enjoy, right? I mean, like, were those,
yeah. But it's what my dad would call indoor work with good lighting. I mean,
yeah, right.
what's the problem?
So you always had that
Right?
perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'd go home and my folks are farming. Like, this is work.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
What did your folks and what did your family and friends make of your getting signed? And what was that? It was Private Music was the label, right? It was a
Yeah. BMG.
subsidiary of BMG, and that had to be a big deal.
It was a big deal.
Yeah, tell me like that what that felt like for you. Obviously, it's very validating. And what did that create for you in terms of a sense of possibility and in terms of a sense of your future?
Well, there's certainly some sense of, okay, now you're playing in the big leagues, right? Um, and that's a good feeling because you do want to know, especially when I mean, I think in any line of work or any field of endeavor, but especially when you're a little kid and you're like, okay, I know I'm good. I don't know how good.
Hmm.
I don't know where is that set, right? And there's kind of a moment, it's like making the Olympics. Okay, okay, now you did something, which is a good feeling, and I think you carry that with you, that you got, up to that level. Um, my parents were always surprised that, I mean, I did not get an education degree. They were surprised when I went to college, and I'm like, well, I'm getting a degree in performance, and they're like, my mother was like, well, don't you think you should have something to fall back on? And I'm like, no. And that took a certain kind of, I mean, you have to be a little crazy to think like that. But I was determined to do it. Um, and lucky me, I did, right? There's no small part of good luck in all that either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's also so interesting because, I grew up in Philly, as I told you before we started, and I remember probably the best job that I've ever had in my life to this day was working at a record store for a couple of years. I worked at Sound Odyssey in the Leo Mall. I don't know if you ever actually ventured as far out to Northeast Philly. That's where I grew up.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, so I worked at the record store, and at the time, there were certain local acts that you were kind of rooting for. And one of them at the time, this would have been like, let's say 86, 7, was Tommy Conwell and the Young Rumblers. I don't know if
Yeah.
you remember them.
Yeah, yeah.
And I remember it was a big deal. So we had their independently made album. We played a lot in the store, and then they got signed to Columbia. Or at
Uh-huh.
least I don't know if the band did. Tommy Conwell did.
Yep.
And it was like, oh my God, like the big leagues.
Big
Like,
leagues.
whoa. Right? Like that
Well,
was
and
the
the
most
Hooters,
exciting. Of course,
right?
the Hooters. Yeah, well, the
Yeah.
Hooters had a legit, like brilliant, like real career. And Tommy Conwell, because the record business is brutal, and if you don't get a hit soon enough, you're out. So yeah, he that was a short-lived career. So, where how much awareness did you have of the fickleness of the music business, and like, like a record deal is not like a tenure, getting as a professor, getting tenure, right? Like you don't,
Yeah.
so, I mean, so what was that experience like for you? Tell us the story of what happened with your record deal. Last of the Good Straight Girls, right, was the record.
Yep.
Just tell me, I'm going to stop talking and just let you take the floor and tell us about what that experience was like for you.
So, in retrospect, I wish that I'd gotten a record deal like 3 years later, because 3 years later, I knew what the brand essence was, right? There's a moment when you know what it is that you're doing, you know what it is you are, who you are, and what it is that you're doing that is, exceptional and has a plumb line all the way through it, and you will keep doing that, right? In 1995, I just happened to be able to play guitar and sing breakup songs, right? And this was a thing in a moment. Um, and I remember when a record came out and my A&R guy says, "Hey, you don't have a hit, but you have a career."
Wow.
And I'm like, "Oh, I guess that's good." Okay. What I didn't know, which is obvious in hindsight, but what I didn't know was what that meant for the record company was, you know, we're gonna have to stick with this with you. We're gonna have to invest another, right, quarter mil, $500,000 in you. And that's gonna take time and money. And we're not sure how much of either one we have,
Mm.
right? And when a corporate conglomerate comes in and gobbles them up, right? And they get dismantled or folded into something else, or I can't remember what happened. Yanni left them, or I don't remember. Uh, but when that happens, that's the end. Your window closes. And so then you find another record deal, right? If you have a good manager, you go out and beat down the bushes again. And look, this was the late '90s. I mean, they were doing this with singer-songwriters.
Yeah,
You
this is a
get that.
moment in time as
It was a
well, right?
moment.
Because
That's right.
things changed big time.
Right.
Um, but
Right.
but it was
And the
still
business now is
that was the
really
holy
different.
grail, was the record deal
Yeah,
still
it
at
was
that
right.
time. Yeah.
That's right. Yep, that's right. So then uh, I got another record deal, and that was with Velvel Koch, and it was Bottom Line Records.
Hmm.
So it was Alan Pepper and Hank Medris at Bottom Line, because Alan owned the Bottom Line Club in New
In New
York.
York.
And then Walter Yetnikoff ran
Hmm.
Velvel. So I remember meeting Walter Yetnikoff. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm going to write a song that makes Walter Yetnikoff cry. Like that was a goal. I mean, how ambitious
Wow.
is that? But I remember thinking,
Wasn't he with Columbia? Why do I have association with that? Okay.
I think that's right, and I think Velvel was one of his other sort of
Okay.
boutique endeavors. Anyway, so that record was really well received, and again, that record company died. But it kind of allowed me to establish a touring reputation as a songwriter with a certain point of view and a certain voice, and that comedy, right, humor was going to be part of the deal, and that sharp wit was going to be part of the deal. Mm, it wasn't without edges, and that has stayed with me ever since. And that's a good moment when you feel like you found a piece of your voice. You found that. Um,
What was the
and that
song that you wrote that you tried to make Walter Yetnikov cry? Was there a specific song?
Yeah, I think there was Old Mistake that was on that tune.
Hmm.
That was on that album.
Record.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm remembering, so our paths first intersected in 1995. I was living in Nashville and I saw you perform at the Bluebird, and
Yes.
it was the Sunday night
Yes.
writers show
Yes.
where I was at the stage of auditioning for that.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And
Uh-huh.
as if you got in, you could do 3 songs on a Sunday night. And that was
Uh-huh.
like that was kind of a big deal. Like, at least, like, it took me 5 auditions to get to that point.
Yes.
Five tries.
Yes.
But then they would always have a featured writer at the end of the writers' night that would come on and do like a full set. And one
Mhm.
night that was you, and I'd never heard of you. And I was like, I was, I was floored. I was really like, wow, like, she has, like, the full package. She can sing, she can play, she can write. Like, wow. But what's really, and I went out, I told you this, I went out and to Hastings Music and bought my copy of The Last of the Good Straight Girls, the CD, which I have on my desk here.
Thank you. Thank you for your business.
Yes. And so like that was my introduction to you. Now, interestingly though, I did not like hear about you after that for whatever reason, you know. And fast forward 11-ish years and I'm living out in LA and I see you on the calendar playing the Caves. And I don't know if you had been there before. I don't do you remember like this would have been 2006. Do you know it had you been playing there prior to that? Do you know?
Not so much, no.
Yeah, because I think I would have because when I saw your name, it was like ding, and I was like, oh, like I got to go see Susan Werner. And when I saw you then, as impressed as I was the first time, it was like it was you had leveled up your game to me in a profound way. I was like, and the thing that the ingredient that was new to me again, I long absence of seeing you in between was the humor. Like,
Yeah.
that was not part of what you did in when I saw you with the Bluebird. You were, you were dynamite in terms of everything. Like I said, the singing, the playing, the writing, but the humor was completely not part of that package. And then when I saw that and your stage presence and the songs, then I've been, then you have become a favorite ever since. Like a real like wow. Um,
Well, thanks for saying that. And I think if you enjoy my work, I mean, it's because you're a songwriter yourself. You see what's, you know what you're looking at, right? You know when what you're hearing, and you see the structure, and you're like, oh, it's going to come together like this, boom, right? You see it yourself because you do it.
Well, I mean, I've
Um,
also like it takes. I mean, I really want I really want this compliment to kind of sink in because for whatever it's worth, because like as someone who's done it and as someone who has seen, like, I mean, I couldn't even count how many thousands of people playing their songs on a guitar. It's not. I'm not wowed easily. It does not happen a lot. Like, so for that to happen, from my point of view, it means a lot. And of course, we all think highly of our own opinions, but I'm right. And yeah,
Thank you.
yeah,
But I want to say something about what you pointed out about humor.
yeah.
That I had that in my earlier writing before I got the record deal.
Hmm.
And like like with classical music, there can be this seriousness, right, about what we think is the great art. And classical music is not known as particularly funny. And Songwriters in that moment, if you think about female songwriters in the early 90s, we're talking Suzanne Vega. I mean, not exactly a barrel of laughs, though, and a tremendous talent, right? But
Yeah.
not
Oh,
known for
yeah.
being funny in her songs.
Right.
Sarah McLachlan, right? Sean Colvin. I mean, funny, not a part of that.
No, that's really
And
true.
to get into this moment in 1995 where, you get a record deal, there was this role, and you have to shave off the humor to get there.
Although Jill
And
Sobule,
Jill Sobule, amazing,
right?
right? Amazing. But again, once you agree to put humor in as part of your work,
Well, then she
there's a
fell into the
deal.
trap of then that was the expectation.
There
Yeah.
is a deal you make, right? Which is, if you're gonna have humor as part of your presentation, there's a certain kind of and that wasn't true for Joni Mitchell, right? Joni Mitchell was funny. People forget that. Carole King, not funny. I mean, amazing, but
Mm.
not funny. Joni Mitchell was funny. She knew, right, how that mattered, and she wrote that into. She used that as a tool, really. I mean, Pave Paradise, Put Up a Parking Lot. She knew how to, make a joke, even have, snap to it. Um, and once you did that in the 90s, it was you were going to be pushed off to the side as like not a major player. That's nice, you're great, but then you're folk, and funny is folk. Gene Shea always said this:
Hmm.
if you're funny, it's folk. And I think embracing that part of my presentation was, a willingness to be like, okay, I'm going to do what it is I do, not to serve
Yeah, and it's a piece of it. It's
commercial
not. It's
potential.
not like
Yeah,
you're
but
not
even
a.
so, the minute
Yeah.
you put it in as
Yeah.
part of the
Yeah.
package, people are like, oh, yeah, yeah. And that's too bad. It really is too bad. And men are allowed to be funny. Dylan funny,
Hmm.
Dylan funny, um, but women funny, not serious. Once you're a little funny, you're not serious. and a willingness to accept that and be like, okay, this is what I'm going to do for whatever that is, whatever that brings or doesn't bring. This is the brand essence. This is it. I mean, this is what I'm going to do.
So your second album on your second record deal, Time Between Trains.
Had humor.
Yeah.
Um,
Actually, I want to ask you about, there's certain songs I want to ask you about. And specifically, I'm not going to do too much of that, but I do want to know the story behind a couple of your songs. And Movie of My Life. So that was the closer, like
1998.
that
Yeah.
was the hidden track, I think, on Time Between Trains, right? Um, that song is genius. It's brilliant. It's hilarious, but it's deeper than that, I think. So what is the story behind that song?
Yeah, I wrote that song. Um, and I'm like, I like this song. Like this song, I enjoyed writing the song. I enjoy hearing the song. I am like, that's a good song. I'm enjoying this song. And brought it out to people. They loved it. It's like, okay. And it didn't fit in any of those categories of singer-songwriters. What is it? It's almost like I had a couple heroes early on, like Jacques Brel and Tom Lehrer.
Oh, Tom Lehrer. I'm
And
so glad you mentioned him because I hear that in you. And like, I mean, again, you're not doing Tom Lehrer, but the attention to detail with the rhyme schemes and the clever turns of phrases. And like I hear that in as you know, in there. Chicago Any Day. I hear that in there.
yeah,
And I
it's
love
musical
him.
theater in a way.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, yeah.
cabaret, it's musical theater because perfect rhymes, and that you start a song, but you don't wind up in the same place. By the end, you're in a different place, right? So Movie of My Life starts out with this overconfident point of view. When they make the movie of my life, I hope they get somebody beautiful to play me. Like I deserve a movie, right? I deserve this. And by the end, the narrator is completely crushed, devastated, and entirely aware of their own mediocrity. Right? And that's what theater is, right? That's what a theater song is that
Yeah,
there's a
but so what
journey
where
over the
like what do
course
you
of
remember
three
what the
minutes.
what the germ of that was where you got the idea for that song?
I think it feels very Jacques Brel to me,
Hmm.
because it's dark. It's a little
Mhm.
dark,
You know what
friendly
it may
dark,
I'll tell you
but
what it
dark.
makes me think of, or reminds me of, is the Anne Lamott book, Bird by Bird. Are you familiar with this book?
Yes.
So, she's writing about writing. It's a great,
Uh-huh.
great book for writers. And there's a chapter for me that's the most memorable chapter in the book, which she calls KFKD radio station, K fucked. And basically the idea is that it's like this stereo signal you're getting from your ego where one channel or one speaker, one ear is telling you how you're the best thing that's ever happened to the planet Earth, right? Like, you're a genius, you're the greatest. And then there's the insecure version of the ego and the other speaker coming out the other ear, saying, I'm shit, this is worthless. I'll never amount to anything. And it's like those competing voices. So when I hear that song, I sometimes am reminded of that because it really is it's a song about the ego.
Well, you have to have some ego if you're
Oh
gonna,
my God, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, do anything, right? But
well,
especially if you're gonna get
especially.
up in front of people,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you got to think you deserve this attention in some
Right.
way. And then you're out there, you're like, what am I thinking? I have nothing for them. Uh, there are times if I'm a little freaked out, and I don't get stage fright, but a little freaked out where I'm like, what am I doing? And I just open the curtain and just look out. And I'm like, oh, yeah, they're just people,
Hmm.
right? They're just people who want to have a good time. Okay. Okay. It just kind of shrinks the task. But they just want to have a good time. Okay. They're just
Well,
like
and
me.
your ability to like not take your this is a fine line, right? Like you have to have an ability to not take yourself too seriously. But if you want to be a great artist, you also have to take yourself seriously. So you're doing both. You have to do both of those things. You have to find the right balance of that, I think.
But I think it was one of Leonard Bernstein's daughters, either I think Jamie Bernstein or Mimi Bernstein. I'm going to get it wrong, but one of his daughters said, and I quote, "You can't be amazing on purpose." I love that because being serious about your, greatness is absolutely going to kill the greatness, right? I know it happens as a result. Great things happen as a result of practicing excellence over time, and then these things sort of spark out, uh, even when you're not looking, right?
Mm.
I always tell songwriters, fold your own laundry. Never miss an opportunity to clean your own house. Uh,
Yeah, you remember
the
you're a
shower,
person.
yeah, but well, the shower is golden, right? The shower, I don't, that's a terrible phrase. How about, come on, we'll just leave that. But anytime you're brushing your teeth, there are moments where the ideas will come in, and it's not because you're staring at your laptop,
Right.
screaming at the empty page, right? You're not sitting in front of your piano yelling at it.
You're in a receptive space
You're in a
because you're not.
half, you're half paying attention.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, so after Time Between Trains, there's a 3 years before the next record, new
yeah.
nonfiction
Sounds right. About a 3 year cycle, two
ish.
year cycle. Yeah.
So what happened to record deal number two, and what happened next?
I think bottom. I think bottom line went belly up. I think
The
that's what happened.
venue or
No, no,
not
the
yet?
record
Okay,
label, the record
yeah,
company,
but the
the
venue
record
did
company.
too at some point.
Eventually,
Yeah, eventually.
eventually,
That was much later,
that
probably.
was
Yeah,
much later. Yeah.
yeah.
Um, and then, but I think they got bought by Koch. I'm not. No. And then I made an indie. That's right. In 2001, I made an indie, and it had humor in it, and that record feels very much like, yeah, this is me. This is what I do. This is it. Yeah. Um,
So new nonfiction. So that I had put a pin in this, so we're gonna unpin it and bring it back out on the table because the last song on new nonfiction. Um, Tell us the story behind May I Suggest and
mm,
Faye Khan. Yeah.
hmm So I had moved out. I mean, let me back up a step. So the piano I wrote "Movie of My Life" on. Faye always came over to tune it. She was a
Mm.
piano tuner and a dancer, and she wrote shows like at the Painted Bride and stuff in Philly.
Mm.
She would do one woman shows, and she did one about breast cancer. Um, and uh, Faye was just, she was really unique, a unique, large, she was like a large child. She was like a full grown child somehow, that she kept this spark and
Mm.
risk about what it is she did, and was confident about its value. That was one of Faye's great charms, was that she was absolutely confident that the making of this art mattered, and it would matter, and it merited attention. She just knew it, and she was right. Um, and then when I moved out to Chicago in 2000, I got a phone call that Faye had died, and I'd kind of stayed in touch with her all the way along, so I knew it was coming. But and that song was like an involuntary. Some songs happen almost like an involuntary reflex. Like I just started kind of moaning, like, what is something is coming? What is it? May I suggest? May I suggest? I suggest this is the best part of your life. Like Faye was like, and again, I think it's because of this breast cancer support group we were in together, and some of the um, Buddhist teachings that floated
Mm.
across that support group. But like now, right now, this is it now. And that's what Faye had to tell me every time I interacted with her through breast cancer support group and after. Right now, do it right now. And she wanted to go to Israel. That was her determination. Got her to Israel. That was her dream, and she did it before she
Did
passed away.
she articulate that to you, the importance of now? Like,
Yep.
did she? Yeah.
No, this is it. This is it, Suze. This is it. Right now.
Wow. So do you feel like you were almost channeling her? Like, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but like that song feels like it comes from, like as a song, like as a songwriter, if you get a song like that in the course of your entire life, like that is like the greatest gift. That's like being I can't anointed, right? That's being blessed. Like that's like here you get to be the channel for this. You get to be the vehicle for this. That's the kind of song like you have a lot of great songs, Susan, and that one just stands. I cannot, I cannot not cry when I hear you play that every time. I know it. I know what's coming. I know, but it's especially if it's, I don't, honestly, I don't know how you sing it without getting choked up. It is
But
the most,
I know it's a mirror, right? We were
yeah,
talking
it's
earlier
the
about how
most
songs are mirrors.
beautiful song.
It's like just hold up the mirror. That's all, right? Just do a good job of holding up this moment and letting people see themselves in it.
Mm.
And don't get in the way of it. Don't get fancy. Don't get musical. Don't. Just play the song and let the words go by and let people go where they're going. And, this is something I can do for people. So, do that. Do that.
What's great is that every time I see you, and obviously I'm in a different point in my life, I'm who knows what happened that day or that year, and the song's the same. It's the same song, but it's equally powerful and meaningful, and but it has a different flavor every time because it's a different moment. But it's like the ultimate reminder of to value your life and to value to value this present moment. It's a gift, and you don't know how much, how many more you'll be given. So it's always the message is always relevant. Always.
Clock's ticking, right? Clock's ticking.
It's a perfect
Um,
song from my like vantage point. It's just it's and it's
Thank you.
so yeah, I mean, thank you for being the vehicle for it. And
So you
may I
just got to get
suggest
out of
to
the way.
listeners, if they haven't heard your music, may I suggest that song as a starting place? May I suggest, although there's a lot of great entry points for Susan Werner. Um,
Thank you,
so
Eric.
so in an interview that I found with you that John Platt did, interviewing you, and for those who want to, if you're enjoying this interview, you should definitely go check out John Platt's interview with you, which you can find if you go on YouTube and type in "Inside the Musician's Mind," Susan Werner. You did this interview with him at a public library in
Oh
Port
yeah.
Washington in 2019.
Wow.
Yeah. Remember that?
Well, I think inside the musician's mind can be a frightening place to go. So I don't know. You're recommending it. I'm not sure I will,
Yeah.
but okay.
Okay. That's the name of the series, I think,
Yeah, I think that's right.
yeah, but it is hilarious. Anyway, you said I'm going to quote you from that interview. You said, and I quote, to go into those places where you don't know if you're going to be able to pull it off, that's where the energy is.
Hmm.
There's no energy in safety. There's no energy in predictability. If you don't know if you can quite do it, that's where all the fun is for me anyway.
For me
That's what you
anyway.
said.
Yeah.
Unquote.
Right. Yeah.
I agree. And to me, when I heard you say that, I felt like there was something of your essence in that quote. Like I felt like that is you. Um, like you live that. You live that.
Well, thank you, but I think it's all of us when in terms of creativity.
Mm,
There's the things we do to keep the lights on and keep the bills paid. And then there's places where, maybe we'll walk towards discomfort emotionally. Maybe we'll challenge ourselves in terms of a friendship or a family relationship or something. But the willingness to have some discomfort as you go through your day, as you go through your days, right? That that the it's another Buddhist thing. I think it's Pema Chodron who said, the human tendency is to safety and comfort, right? We're all organisms looking for safety and comfort. Um, and there'll be times when that is exactly where we should be and understandably want to be. But in terms of feeling most alive, right? There's this moment of not knowing. And in the not knowing, which is
mm,
why I love giving a live show, right? Is because you don't know what's going to happen that night in that audience. You don't know who came in the door with what energy and what random thing is going to happen, but something random is going to happen. Um, and whether it's you yourself dropping a glass of water or your guitar falls over, it could be you, but something's going to happen that night that is not scripted. And in creative endeavors, I think for anyone, who does any form of creative art, or finds there's some puzzle making, puzzle solving in their field of endeavor. It's the not knowing, and it's the moment of the whoa, there it is. That's like it lights up the pinball machine of the brain. That's it. Yeah. Huh. Right? That's that's kind of the point. I mean, whether you're a scientist and you're doing research and it comes together, right? You don't know, you do know. Uh, that's, this is one of the most alive feelings we can have. And it doesn't have to cost a lot of money. I mean, look, if you're doing research, okay, you're going to have to get funding. But in terms of our own creative endeavors in our own homes, or shops or garages or studios, right? There's so much fun in the not knowing, and then, oh, that's possible. It's possible. Or look, that happened by accident. The not knowing is the big fun. It is.
Yeah,
It's one of the
and
great things about being a human being, right?
yeah, yeah, and this actually, so when I told my wife Samantha that I was interviewing you today, I said, "Do you have anything that you'd like me to ask her? You'd like me to ask Susan?" And she said, um, "What is a memory that you have of this exact feeling? Like, can you share an experience or a memory? What comes to your mind about when you've felt most alive? Can you think of an example of an experience where that you've felt most alive? Maybe you have a million of them, but
Hmm. I'm feeling pretty alive right now.
oh,
I just agreed to do something in a meeting today that I don't know how I am going to pull this off.
hmm.
It's pretty ambitious. I don't know how I'm going to pull this off. I think I can pull it off, but I don't know I can pull it off. And I'm feeling real alive right now because I just scared myself, right? I just agreed to do something I'm not sure I can actually do. And anytime you make a record, here's an example of a moment I feel most alive. So last year, I was finished with the Florida project, and some of my family had moved to Texas, and I was in Houston, and I was driving down to Corpus Christi for the first time, and I'd never been to Corpus before, and I've been to Houston plenty, but okay, now I'm down here more because now I have family here. So I was driving down to Corpus to see my nephew and his wife and their two kids, and I was driving. Um, I drove down to Galveston because I always wanted to do that, and then I turned right and I started driving to Corpus, and I started hearing a song in my head, and I'm like, oh no, here comes the next project. Oh no. There's this moment, right? These are big moments in my little life anyway, which is like, oh shit. I now know what it is, and now I'm going to have to do it. I don't know how it's going to turn out. I don't know what the songs are all going to be about. I just know I'm going to do a Texas project. So what that means is, like, if it's a travel log project, then I know I'm going to have to start making trips down somewhere by myself and then driving around. Or like when I did the Cuba project, I went to Cuba by myself, and you just have to go until you get it. When I did the New Orleans project, went down to New Orleans by myself. You just have to be down there enough. And I just think this sounds a little silly, but one way of thinking about it is that the songs are like, the songs are, they're like on the wind, and you have to drive and roll down your window, and then they'll fly in. You can't just stand there and wait for them. Like, you have to actually meet them halfway. So in motion, songs show up. But the idea of text, like when the Texas one came in, I'll just say, I mean, like, fuck, here it is. And okay, now you got to do it.
How do you know in those like how do you know in that moment? What's the knowing? Tell me about the knowing.
What comes together is, oh, I think there's enough here. There's enough here in terms of thematic material and storytelling that there'll be an album here. And then when it attaches to a place that has a sound universe, right? Like Cuba, like New Orleans. And even Florida, there's this movement or style of music called Gulf and Western. I didn't even know it was called that, right? But Gulf and Western is Jimmy Buffett, it's Kenny Chesney, right? It's a lap steel and a marimba, right? It's Caribbean meets country.
Mhm.
And so then I just started obsessively listening to those kinds of songs, that music, and driving around listening to that kind of music so that the patterns are handy.
You're
You
immersing
know,
yourself.
it's like language immersion course,
Yeah.
absolutely. And then you're living your life and you have a feeling or an experience and it attaches to a pattern because the patterns are handy. You kept them around you, right? They're top of mind, they're fresh, they're handy. Um,
It's like it reminds me of like a novelist going to a particular place to work on a particular book and to sort of take in, if they can, take in the environment so that it can seep into the story.
right. It's good to be there. It helps. You can do it in your imagination, but it
Right.
will lack a certain specificity. It really
Yeah.
will. What was really productive on this particular record, which comes out in February, by the way, what was really helpful was a trip to West Texas. And I had never been there before. I'd only been to like, Austin, Houston, Dallas, Fort
Kerrville.
Worth, and Kerrville,
Kerrville.
right, right, and San Antonio. But I took a trip to West Texas. I flew into El Paso and then went down to Marfa and Alpine and even Big Bend. So it's really the back ass end of Texas that I'd never been to before. And that was a really productive week because I was alone. I didn't know anybody. Texans will talk to you too, though. That's the great thing about going to Texas is people really will. They'll just chat you up, and and they're very proud of Texas, so happy to talk about it. And but being in a corner of the state I didn't know at all, and being isolated, like kind of having only myself to talk to, and memory and sense impressions, and a lot of songs came up out of that. That was a
Hmm.
really useful trip.
Does the project have a name yet?
Yeah, it's called Halfway to Houston.
Nice.
And again, because it has humor and all of these things, and and I've also aged out of the prized demographics. Yeah, I'm funding it myself and put it out. But when you pay for it yourself, you get to make all the decisions about it. You get to decide what goes in and what doesn't go in, and you have the full range of uh, styles that you do and language that you use.
This is the
And
gift of not being beholden to a label.
this is one of the gifts of not being famous. I mean, maybe you can be famous and do that, but idiosyncrasy is, it's a blessing and a curse, but it's mostly a blessing because I think it's what I wanted all along anyway. You know,
Yeah,
where
from the outside, your career is so enviable and beautiful because it appears that you're really true to your personal inspirations and you follow your muse where it takes you with a sort of you know it's not that you don't care what your audiences think. Obviously, you're an extremely crowd pleasing entertainer when you're on stage, but it's sort of like, you know, everyone else be damned, I'm doing this. Like, and and it's like it's been like for you, it's been gold. It's like you've been spinning gold. I Can't Be New was the first one of those, right, where you did a whole album's worth of songs, like
right,
as if they had been written in the 20s and 30s, right, like right out of Cole Porter, but they were new songs and with your voice in them, but with that style. You did a whole album of those, and then you completely, and with each project ever since, you completely just do a 180. Now you're going to do something and now for something completely different. Um, and the Gospel Truth, which is, if I had to pick a favorite album of yours, that's it. Um, that Can you talk a little bit about how that how you decided to do that project and what that project meant to you?
so earlier you and I talked about early music experiences, and certainly the church um, was the church had the music and school, but because the nuns had the guitars, right, and that was something I saw from early on in my life. Um, and my parents are religious, and um, that the church was always, riding alongside in my childhood experience. Um, but so that's certainly a piece of it. But also in 2004, some of your audience may remember that there was this big thing about gay marriage was going to, ruin the country,
Hmm.
right? That we queer people were we were the great threat to the American social fabric. And I have 3 gay siblings as well, and I think we just felt like there's a moment you feel like somebody took the cannon and they're aiming it right at you.
Like it's personal now.
Now it's personal.
Hmm.
You're like, what? It, we're just people. What are
Hmm.
you? What? And to know that, you know, that like Proposition 8 was funded by, I mean, I may have some of this wrong, but I don't think so. Like the Mormon Church funded this. I think the Catholic Church was behind some of it in terms of funding this kind of like, what are you doing? Like, what? And in conversations with people, of course, it came up that all kinds of people had difficulties, divorces, um, feeling condemned for various things.
Hmm.
Certainly the role of women in leadership. Like the Catholic Church still doesn't have women in leadership. I mean, what? And why would you be part of something where women aren't in the leadership? Why would, I mean, just going to speak frankly, why would anyone want to be a part of something where women aren't
Why
in?
would any woman in particular want to be part of something
Right, but
where
why
that's
even would any
why
guy
would any
who,
human? Yeah.
why would any human do it?
Yeah.
Like this? No. Again, there's no women in positions of leadership in the Catholic Church. The thing is built so they're not. And no, just no. And so I started to use the music of the church to speak about the church. And these songs were like, boom, these were landing. And especially in Boston, because the Catholic Church,
Hmm.
huge in Boston. Like, it was just like, wow, step on a live wire in Massachusetts. And I remember talking to Larry, my manager at the time, and I said, Larry, I want to do this record. And he's like, who is going to buy this record?
And explain the concept. Explain for those who haven't heard it or don't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's I called it agnostic gospel, right? Like church music for agnostic, hymns for agnostics. And yeah, I remember this conversation with Larry. He's like, "Who is going to buy this? Where is the bin for that in the record stores?" And I said, "Larry, I don't care. I think I got to do this." And it was a moment where, the practical part of me is like, "Look, you have to pay the bills." Right? You have to pay the bills. And it's like, well, my live touring career was robust enough to allow me to take these risks. And this is really the good fortune of my work, I gotta say, is that I feel that. I feel that because my live shows are good, I'm able to take these creative risks. I feel really lucky about that. That is a kind of success to me. Anyway, so that's how that album came about. And it was received and also not received. I mean, I had people get up and walk out. I had people write letters to the people at the venue, the presenters who had me in, saying, why did you have this show in your series, right? Why did you bring her in? And
Wow.
so talking about going where you don't know how it's going to turn out. That
Well,
was one of those.
what I thought though, when you said Larry, your manager, saying to you, "Where's the bin in the record store for agnostic gospel?" Like I sort of imagined inhabiting you at that moment and saying, "Exactly, where is the bin for agnostic gospel?" Because I want to hear it. And it's like, I think the artistic impulse, right, for so many people is to make art that doesn't yet exist that you want to see in the like, you want there to be this, so you make it. It's like a natural creative impulse, I think. Um,
Yes, but it doesn't align with necessarily paying your bills,
no,
right?
no. In fact,
And so
it
this was
could,
a right.
yeah.
This was a moment where it's like, I really don't know how this is going to turn out in terms of audience or creatively, either one,
Hmm.
right? But I just felt like I'm gonna throw, as I say, throw your knapsack over the wall and make yourself go get it, right?
Did it
Yeah.
feel as you were working on it or at any stage of it, did you feel scared?
Hmm. Hmm. But I was going to do it anyway because in my heart of hearts, I was like, "What? Why are you shooting at gay people? What is this?"
So that helped you overcome any like trepidation about it.
I
Yeah.
was pissed off. I
Yeah.
was
Nice. Yeah.
insulted.
Well, that's a motivator.
It was a motivator. It is insulting. It remains insulting. It remains insulting. It's insulting to the end of time to demonize queer people. It's the handiest scapegoat, and it remains so. And here we are in 2023, and we're going after trans kids.
Let me ask you, because the breaking news story about the Pope that I'm sure you've probably heard,
Yeah, I heard this.
like,
Yeah.
how do you feel about this?
Like, keep
And the break,
coming. Like, keep coming. Good. You're going to bless same sex couples? Great. Good start.
Hmm.
Keep coming.
Do you see that as like pressure coming from the bottom up? It strikes me as a sort of
Hmm.
it's a gesture and yet it's a non, it's like a almost like a it's like we're recognizing you and we're not recognizing you at the same time. Like
Right.
what
Yeah.
it's a confusing message, right?
Confusing. The big one is, that same-sex marriage or queer marriage is as valid as any other marriage. That's do that or don't do anything,
Yeah,
or don't do it.
right.
Because the lesser, it's like, what do you but I think Francis is trying to do something
Hmm.
here. I think he might be a little bit ahead
Well,
of
he
where some
has
of the rest of
a
the church is.
he has a reason to be trusted. Like he has a track record that doesn't make like, but I still had that reaction. I couldn't help but feel like I don't know like but
It feels like a bit of a crumb, doesn't it?
hmm.
To me anyway.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and how did so you mentioned that your parents are religious. I assume that they always were and have been and still are. So what was their reaction to this album? Yeah, and how concerned about their reaction were you?
I think they were, as I'll tell you, they took it in the spirit it was intended,
Mhm.
which is, here are things to love about the church. Here are things to love about the music of the church. Because there are some songs that are really very of the tradition. Uh, and there are songs that you'd hear and you'd be like, oh, she's absolutely in the fold, because there are things that I do hold from that I have hung on to, and I think a lot of us from our childhoods, there are things we keep because we know something about that is good, and there are things we discard because that is not good, and this does not help us, our lives, or anyone else's lives around us now. So making sense of the things we keep and the things we don't. That's part of the record for sure. But my mother, she's like, absolutely, there should be women in the leadership of the
Hmm.
Catholic Church. Absolutely. She would clap at that line when there's a line, remind the Pope that he could have been born a girl.
Right.
Like, right? I mean, look, there's some of it that's, yeah. Anyway,
Yeah, that's a beautiful record, a really, really like through and through uh song for song. It's it's I know you're
thank
holding up
you.
a mirror, but like uh
But that's why it works,
hmm.
right? That's why it works, is because there were a lot of people that felt this way. There were a lot of people going through this moment.
Yeah, and you don't even I grew up Jewish now, like very secularly so. Religion was not a huge part of my upbringing, but it still landed so powerfully for me that every song really on that album is just you nailed it like and
Well,
if it's
condemnation, shame,
yeah.
belonging, some of that really is universal.
Hmm.
Uh, uh,
Well, and also questioning and wondering and celebrating and also like really you key into some key values, I think, that are, I think, that are contained within some religions and maybe even a lot of religions, but they're
mhm.
also independent of them. There's just like a sense of what's right and what's good. Like, and that, like, that just awakens something in you as a listener, like, yes, like which is, and the fact that you're doing it in this style
Yeah, because the style of gospel music and the
is like
music of
lifts
the
you.
church. Yeah, and it does more than half of the work. The style of the music immediately communicates something before you even hear lyrics, right? And so to run lyrics across that template, that challenge the template,
Mm.
that friction is really a big part of that album. I want to tell you, my friend Kenny Feinberg, who grew up Jewish, she went with me to the Chicago Gospel Music Festival in 2005, I think, and or right around in there. And she said, "Boy, I love this music." I said, "I know, I do too. I love it." And she said, "How do you get the joy without the Jesus?" I'm like, there it is. So there are some songs on that album. One is called "I Will Have My Portion." It's very much about anticipating something good coming. And this is the essence of, to me, a lot of gospel music is positivity, hope,
Mm.
anticipation of something better. And I still will listen to like Kirk Franklin's Praise Channel on Sirius XM when
Mm.
I like want a shot of like, yeah, right? Because it's like, okay, God, I know, and Jesus and your personal relationship with Jesus. Oh, I mean, some of it is like, date night with Jesus. I'm like, no. I'm like, okay, I'll come back in a minute. Okay. Then you get to like, right? Today is a good day. Today is a good day, right? That kind of song, so much energy.
Mm.
And there's a lot of pop rock music. There's a lot of hip hop. It's just downer and complaining and oh man, I got a life to live, right? We all got places to go and things to do, and enough bad news coming in all the time
Yeah, well,
from all
people are
sides.
looking to be lifted, right?
Lift
People want
me
joy.
up.
Yeah. Yeah.
You got it. So the other day I was thinking I would love to do another agnostic gospel
Mm.
project because something good is coming, right? Everybody can use hearing that any day, every day, all day.
So was this a project that you financed yourself?
The gospel truth, yeah.
Yeah. Mm.
You
And
know,
has that
those were
been
those were the good old days, though. I mean, that was like you made a CD and you sold like 50,000 of them, right?
well,
Those
you
were the
did.
good old days. But I'm just saying,
Yeah, right. Where
those
that was
I
possible, where that was possible. I'm going to ask you about that before we're done, about like the state of things now, for people pursuing your line of work.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but but yeah, that was a home run for sure. And I just want to touch on some other projects of yours and and a general question, specific and general at the same time. So, um, I believe the album right after that, and I should check my notes to make sure I'm right about this, was Classics. Is that right?
I think so, yeah. And again, I didn't know how that was going to turn out.
Oh my goodness. So that also was, again, total like classic, American songbook to agnostic gospel. And then you do this marriage of like classic pop rock songs from the late 60s and 70s, married in a chamber music presentation. So it's like classical classics,
Yep.
right? Genius. And I couldn't believe I was listening to that actually not too long ago with my wife on a long road trip, and I was wondering aloud. This is before I think before we had confirmed our interview even, but and I said, uh, "Who did the arrangements on these?" Like, and then of course it was you. Like, I was like, "Damn."
Well, I didn't write out, right. I didn't write out the string parts. I had somebody do the orchestrations. I can't do all that,
Hmm.
like
There,
write a
there,
cello and a viola part. But in terms of the order of events, in the arrange in the yeah in the arrangement, not the string parts, but what
okay.
happens where.
Hmm.
Uh, it was a way
You had a
of
George Martin to assist you.
yeah, Brad Hatfield with the Boston Pops
Hmm.
wrote up the string arrangements. But yeah, I had a hand in some of that. But it was more about what pieces came together. What was the marriage of the classical piece with the pop piece, right? Like Bob Marley's "I don't want to wait in vain anymore" was we put it together with one of the hymnopédies of Satie.
Sati. Yeah.
And then the Vivaldi Winter uh, concerto putting that together with Hazy Shade of Winter. Like, so I did that part, right? Is what is
That's
the marriage of the
freaking
piece with the
cool.
thing?
But
Well,
again,
I'm glad you feel that way, right? I
yeah.
had an agent, a touring agent at the time. He's like, "This is terrible. You shouldn't even put this out." I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "No one will want this." I'm like, "Okay." And then I put it out, and then I had
Where's the
a
bin? Where's the bin for that one?
where's the pen? Yeah, and so I had a cello player come with me, and she was amazing, amazing. And so we, would put cello parts on other tunes and other things I'd written, like "Movie of My Life," right, which is big fun.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
but anyway, that was the presentation, right? And it was ambitious. Again, not knowing how it's going to turn out.
Part of the fun.
This is part of the fun. That's right.
What has surprised you most about the person you've become? Or what do you think might come as the biggest surprise to your childhood self in who you have, um, you know, who you are today and what your journey's been like?
Yeah, if I think back to like an 8-year-old or 10-year-old self, it's like it will happen. You will be it it will happen. What you're supposed to do will happen.
Hmm.
Um, don't worry, it'll happen.
Would any of it, do you think, have been a surprise? Like, for instance, just I don't know, like, would your 8-year-old self, do you think, say, yeah, if I could see me becoming a musician of some kind or a
Yeah, that I didn't know what form it would take, but I knew I wanted to do that. I was fully occupied, fully engaged in making music, and that there will be a way for you to spend much of your life doing exactly that. That will happen.
okay, couple last questions. So, like, artists have notoriously fallen prey to all kinds of unhealthy habits and behaviors and addictions and self-destructive tendencies and whatnot.
Yeah.
How have you, at least on the surface, like you seem to have, well, you're still alive, number one, and you seem to have navigated this and maintained a certain like degree of well-being and sanity. So what for you has made a difference in terms of just taking care of yourself and also, avoiding maybe some of the hazards of the gig?
Um, I think having cancer was really a reset. Like, I couldn't burn the candle at both ends, which I had been doing before that. I had a day job, and then I would do things, gigs at night and auditions and stuff. I was just, not getting enough sleep and not taking care of myself. And after that, I began to prioritize well-being. Um, that's important. I didn't keep burning that hard, but probably because, the big alarm bells went off, like, don't do that.
Mm.
So there were certain kinds of indulgent behavior that I just kind of cut back on and was a little better about getting enough sleep. Um, I do like to exercise. I think that's important. I think good uh, antidepressants has been helpful.
Mm.
Um, but I just, yeah, all things in moderation, uh, including moderation sometimes,
Yeah.
but mostly moderation helps. Longevity comes from not burning it too hard at any one moment, because you want to see what you're going to do 5 years from now, then you got to be here 5 years from now to do that. And I keep thinking there's something else I'm going to be doing 5 years from now that's going to be fun.
Yeah, which begs the question, who is the person that you wish to become next, or the version of yourself that is on the edge that you're maybe toying with or aspiring toward, or what do you what do you imagine is next for you? Obviously, you have a new album coming out. I know that there's been a very long-standing musical that is,
Yeah, it's going up at Duke next September. So September of 2024, Bull Durham, the musical, which is based on the MGM film from 1986, will do a 3-week run at the Reynolds Theater at Duke University uh, from September 10th to September 22nd, and probably extend into the next weekend. And I wrote the music and lyrics for that. And for your audience who sees this and can get there, I sure hope you can come because the
Mm.
choreography is great. The score is pretty good, I'll admit. And
You've worked
it's
long and
just a
hard on
big,
it, I know.
yeah, but it's a big fun show. You know, it's a big fun old school show. Like just let's have a good time. Oh, there's couples, they fall in love. Great. Really. It's just it doesn't aspire to necessarily change society in any profound way, which is its downfall and also its strength. I mean, it doesn't overpromise, right? And it's a real fun, you know, it's a really fun 2 hours. It's really fun.
Nice. Any connection to Damn Yankees like that because I when I think of a fun musical about baseball, that was the first thing that comes to my mind. But
I think it'll leave you in about the same space.
yeah.
Maybe even a little more moved because hopefully
Mm.
these characters are in fact, I know they are. I mean, these characters are more, they're more fleshed out. They're more fully, you know, fully drawn, completely drawn. And so you're happy for them when they get together with the person that they're meant for.
And the new record, Halfway to Houston, will be out on
February 3rd. And yeah, it'll be up on streaming and all of that. Yeah.
Susan, I just want to thank you so much for making the time for this and having this conversation with me. It was a total delight and privilege to be able to ask you all these questions. And you genuinely are one of my all-time favorite singer-songwriters, and you're in like the big leagues in my heroes of, of what you do. I think you're as good at what you do as anyone else doing it. So I'm a bona fide fan. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you would like to speak to, or anything else you'd like to say before we say goodnight, Gracie?
No, just thanks for doing this. Thanks for bringing these conversations to people. And uh, as I was saying, we talked before we went into the recording, and just your ability to summarize what people brought from earlier interviews and seasons, what these inflection points are. They really are, you know, we're all human beings going through time, right? We're just living our lives, going through the years, going through days, weeks, years. And but the fact that these kind of moments bubble up and that they share characteristics from person to person is really helpful, I think, for viewers um, to see that and to recognize that these things are available to all of us. Um, and even ones that when I was watching some of your interviews, and I'm like, "Oh, that never happened to me, but maybe that will happen to me yet, right?" Uh, you're just doing a service, and I appreciate it, Eric, and I wish you much success. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Susan. Be well.
Thanks.
I'd like to add a short postscript to this episode. For an interviewer, almost inevitably, there are going to be questions you wished you had asked. But in this case, there was an important topic that I promised to circle back to in my conversation with Susan that I dropped the ball on, so I followed up with her about it. I was wanting to know about the reality of her profession in the current day, when most music listeners stream their music rather than purchase individual recordings of their favorite artists. How, I wondered, has this affected recording artists in general, who are not, say, Beyonce or Taylor Swift, and Susan specifically, in terms of the ability to put out new music? Susan replied that, quote, revenue loss of physical CDs is a seismic change, unquote. She went on to tell me that she does more solo shows, touring without additional musicians or road support, and that she will, quote, bite the bullet every few years for a record. It's painful, honestly, unquote. I thought it was important to share that and to remind people of this predicament faced by artists today. If you appreciate someone's work, please remember that a lot went into its creation. And if you have the option to purchase someone's music, even digitally, it's a gesture of support for the artist, and it may be the thing that allows them to continue to make new recordings. Because if it's no longer financially sustainable to do so, and the artist cannot put out new music, that's a loss for both the artist and the audience. All of that said, I'll close this out by reminding you that Susan's newest release, Halfway to Houston, is due out February 9th, 2024. You can find it, along with her entire back catalog of studio and live recordings, as well as her tour dates and other info at Susan Werner, that's WERNER.com. Thanks for watching or listening to this podcast.